Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Morrison. I'm the Cook County Commissioner representing the 15th District here in the northwest suburbs of Cook County. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching us live, or even those of you who may be watching this recording. Just a reminder for any questions you might have for me or our incredible Assessor Fritz Kagi, please put those in the live comments, and we'll be happy to get those questions addressed as soon as we get to the discussion section of our conversation today. I want to start off by just saying I'm grateful to Assessor Kagi for joining me today to discuss his office and the many services it provides Cook County property owners. Helping people understand their assessments, exemptions, among many other joys of owning a home or business is incredibly important. His office has been a great partner, and I applaud their efforts to provide assistance, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to give a special thanks to the assessor for allowing his staff to have office hours here in Schaumburg to allow our property owners here in the northwest suburbs easy access to getting their questions answered without the hassle at this time of having to go downtown. So I really appreciated you doing that for our constituents out here in the northwest suburbs. One of my top priorities when I was elected was to bring constituent services throughout the district. I want to make sure you know every opportunity available and get all your questions answered. This is a chance to listen to Assessor Kagi directly and ask any questions you may have. And without further ado, thank you so much, Assessor, for being with us today.
Thanks, Commissioner Morrison. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I appreciate the invitation and love the work that we've been doing together to make our assessment system work better. You've been a great partner. And I'm really glad to have everyone here attending virtually or watching from home later on. We know you have a lot of things to work on in your life, and that's probably you are here because you have questions, you have a problem, and we want to help you out with that and help you get the information that you need. If there's one thing I've learned since I became assessor a year and a half ago, it's that even people who are steeped in policy making, in tax policy, in the real estate industry, everyone, this system is very hard to understand for everyone, and there are no dumb questions when it comes to what we do, and we certainly have a lot more work to do to help everyone understand how the system works, how we fit within it. I want to leave lots of time for Q&A, and we'll get right to it. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how we fit in the system, and then what services our office provides, and other initiatives that we're involved in, and then we'll get more into detail with that in the Q&A. So I've been assessor since December 2018. I originally come from Hyde Park. I live in Oak Park, so I'm from the suburban community, like many of the folks that are listening in on the call today that Commissioner Morrison represents. And what we've been doing since we came into the office is to try to fix the assessment side of our property tax system, which we know had been broken. Our goal is to make it ethical, transparent, and fair. Our office, we reassess it. We reassess 1/3 of the county every year. And last year in the north suburbs, that was the part of the county that was scheduled to come first under the Illinois property tax code. So we reassessed the north suburbs last year. We're doing the south suburbs this year, and we'll do Chicago next year. Now, a lot of people know that the assessor has something to do with taxes, but it gets a little bit fuzzy from there. So let me tell you about what part of the system we cover and what part we don't. So our part of the system is valuing every piece of property in the county so that taxes, the property tax levies that are determined by other bodies, are divided up amongst us proportionally. So it's all our share, each one of our shares of the property tax levies that have to be paid to pay for our schools and public services. How do we divide that up amongst us? It's according to the market value of our properties, and that's what our role is here is at the assessor's office. The important thing to know is that we don't set the taxes. The taxes that are supposed to be raised through levies, that's largely driven by schools. That's about 2/3 of the property taxes that you pay are for schools. And so if you have referenda that pass in your communities to for the community to take on more investment in its school system, then that can raise the taxes. We don't decide on that at the assessor's office. Your municipality, the village that you live in, will probably be the second largest driver of the property tax levies that you pay. Again, we don't control that, but what we do control is make sure that you're only paying your fair share of those costs that have been determined by others. Another second important thing that the folks should know that not everyone knows is that in this state, the rates that you pay are not fixed for property. The share that you pay of the levy depends on how other people are assessed too. So assessments in the state are interconnected. If your share of the pie is too large, you can be overpaying your share of the property taxes while others are underpaying theirs. And so it's really important from our point of view to make sure that we get everyone's valuation right so that everyone's only paying their fair share. We'll talk more about that today. In many other states, it doesn't work that way. You only have to care about how you're assessed. You don't have to really worry how other people are assessed. It doesn't directly affect you, but here it does. If there's a group of properties that are underpaying their share of the levies, you make up the difference. And so we really focus on making sure that that doesn't happen. We know as part of our work, if we're using market values to reassess properties, one of the hardest things that is going on now is COVID has such a cataclysmic impact on so many people's lives. Of course, not only is it a grave threat to everyone's health, and for that reason, we need to take precautionary measures to protect ourselves, the others that we love, the people who live around us. But this also impacts people's ability to stay in place, to stay current with their mortgage, for a business to survive. And this is changing real estate markets. And so we are taking on, we're really the first jurisdiction in the United States to take on COVID in our assessments. The property tax code in our state allows us to do that. In the spring, when COVID started to break out, we stopped sending out new assessments. We paused and we took into account COVID, and we resent out assessments in the south suburbs. And we'll also be making adjustments in other parts of the county, including in your district, where merited later this year. And we can talk more about that. I don't want to take much more time so that we have plenty of time for Q&A. I think the last initiative that I just wanted to tell you about that affects you is last year when we came into office, we made very big investments in technology so that we could serve you better and do a better job on assessing. And Commissioner Morrison, our host today, has been such a terrific partner in supporting us and the county in doing this. So one of the things that we did is we had a good investment so that we could put you could do appeals online. And so now all your appeals can be done online at our website, cookcountyassessor.com. All the exemptions that you might need, those can be done online too. And that was not possible before. Thanks to Commissioner Morrison, we were able to invest in all new call center technology so that not only can we track and improve performance on calls, but also we can take these calls remotely. And so we're able to do this under conditions of COVID. Without these investments, we wouldn't have been able to serve you so well. We're doing 10,000 calls a month now, and we're only losing 4% of our calls. We're answering calls much more quickly in just a couple of minutes. And so we're proud of the improvement in serving you. And Commissioner Morrison has been a big part of that. We created a whole new website, which we encourage you to use. It's cookcountyassessor.com. You can learn about your community, learn how you're assessed, what goes into it. You can see what's going on around you with your neighbors. We'll be putting on a lot more tools later this year and next year that help you to drive your own appeals process, to learn more about how other people are assessed in your community. We'll have up-to-date imagery. We'll have lots of other things that we think will be useful and interesting for you to serve you on the website. We've also made investments in a commercial data platform so that small businesses and commercial property owners can submit data to us before the assessment process begins. And that saves people time, money, and trouble, because you shouldn't have to pay and endure the uncertainty of the appeals process to fix basic inputs and assumptions that we make when we value your property. If properties can tell us in advance about their costs, their footage, their rents, and other things like that, before the assessment process begins, our assessment can be more accurate. You save any additional costs that you'd have on the appeals process, and then you retain all the rights to appeal. So this is really about serving you better. We're really proud of that platform, which is up also on our website, called the Real Property Income and Expense Form, which you can find when you start at the launch page on the bottom right. From there, I think this is a good time to go right into Q&A. We can talk about some of the things we've been working on here, about the professional people that we've been putting into our office that we're very proud of, all the new processes that make the system work better for you, to serve you better, serve your neighbors better. I really look forward to taking the questions, because that's the most fun part of the session.
Thank you so very much, Assessor. I really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for the overview so far. I've already seen a couple questions come in, and I just want to give a reminder for anyone who may have tuned in before I started our intro. If you have any questions for the Assessor, please put those in the live comments, and we'll be happy to get those addressed. Before we get to a couple of the submitted questions, I did, in line with our current situation and the COVID-19 pandemic, I did want to start a question on that topic first and foremost, and also to give a shout out and reminder to our residents here in Cook County. I was pushing really hard, and last month at the county board, we earmarked $46 million of CARES Act funding to go directly toward mortgagees and renters in need at this moment, especially during this fiscal downturn. If you are a mortgagee or renter in need, we have a program right now where you could apply to get some additional assistance to make sure that you could pay your mortgage and your rent. But in line with what's going on with COVID, we know that COVID-19 has hit so many people incredibly hard, especially financially. Can you talk about what your office has done to support those facing financial hardship due to the pandemic?
Absolutely. Let's start with what we've done immediately in the short term. First of all, we have maintained operations and services all through the COVID crisis, even as we closed our location to keep the public and employee safety. So all these services that we usually provide, we're doing them online. We worked with you, Commissioner Morrison, first with our county treasurer and with the county president in changing the way that we do the deadline on property taxes. So I think one of the important things that we did in the short term was so that normally when your property taxes are due on August 1st, if you are late in making your payment, penalties immediately start to accrue after that August 1st deadline. We created a grace period that goes until October 1st, so folks can, if you miss the deadline on August 1st to pay your property taxes, you have several months now until October 1st to make your payment before penalties start to accrue. We think that provides a measure of relief in the short term. As I said, on most other assessors in the rest of the United States are waiting until next year to change their assessments to take into account the effect of COVID-19. We decided to take this on this year, and we will be doing that in the area that we're reassessing in the south suburbs, but we will be making COVID-related adjustments where merited in the rest of the county this year. And we can do that because of the investments that we've made with the support of Commissioner Morrison in good data to help us be able to be nimble enough to make these changes, and in IT systems that let us make these changes. And we now see other states starting to follow our lead. In Louisiana and Washington State, they're starting to follow that lead too. But it was really those investments and the policy making that our office that allowed us to take that on this year. So what does that mean in practice? It means that for single family homes, we'll be making an adjustment somewhere between 8 and 12% on the assessed value because of COVID, and the exact amount of adjustment will depend on how exposed your community is to unemployment compared to others. So some communities are particularly exposed to the pockets of our economy where there has been this cataclysmic unemployment. And we'll be making adjustments in commercial properties. And we actually made a larger adjustment for small apartment buildings, so under 6 units. That was actually a little bit bigger than that, so the adjustment could be as big as 15%. On commercial properties, there's a wide variety of different impacts from this. Some have been extremely impacted, like hotels and retail spaces, especially small ones. And so where merited, we'll be making adjustments in commercial properties all over the county later this year. That's how we're most immediately dealing with and responding to the COVID crisis. We continue to provide the ability for folks who can't do things online to, in a safe way, visit satellite locations or locations by schedule. So if you have something that you need from our office, you can schedule them. We have put in glass shields, masks, special cleaning regimes, and we're proud of the work that we've done to continue to serve you as you need it under conditions of COVID while keeping you safe. We have to continually react and be flexible as this happens, but know that we're here to serve you. And so many of these tools are available online. We really encourage you to use them under conditions of COVID. And the last thing that I'd mention is that I've been using my voice as assessor to speak out on other matters that are really important for responding to COVID. So I wrote in the Chicago Tribune, just as the COVID crisis is breaking out, that we really need to focus on supporting state and local governments, especially our school districts, in a time like this, so that we don't, on top of all the other cataclysmic effects of COVID, so that we don't, on top of that, have additional property tax burdens put on the hardworking residents of our county. And the federal government can really drive this. If there's more support that they're providing to school districts, either through COVID stimulus or through increased federal support for education, that's how we get the levies down. Because through our assessments, we can fix the fairness of the assessment system, how we divide up the levy, but we also want the levies to come down. And the federal government, especially how it responds to COVID and supports our state and local government, is so important to that. And I've been writing about that, been using my voice to speak up on behalf of that, as have others in the county.
That's amazing. No, I greatly appreciate it. We had a question that was submitted over email, and I just want to, because I'm going to tweak the question a little bit, because part of it was about how some questions more specifically on how to apply and what links they should choose. I just want to give a reminder to folks out there. In the comments, we put the email address on how you could contact the assessor's office, as well as the phone number to get those types of questions answered. But what I will ask from the email was, an identical unit in my condo building has just been sold for $27,000 less than my current valuation. Is that a sound reason to appeal now?
Yes. Whenever you have transactions in properties like yours, or you have market information for properties like yours, that shows that that shows that they're valued at higher than your property is, then that's always good evidence to submit in the appeal. And you can submit that yourself in your appeal. And actually, that's going one step above and beyond. You can actually appeal to our office even without submitting comp and market information, because we will do a whole other re-examination of the fairness of your assessment as part of the appeals process, above and beyond the mass model that we start out with. But when you provide additional information like that, that even helps it even more. So yes, that is good evidence to submit. Just as a reminder, any assessment change we make this year affects your um, affects your tax bill only next year. The other note that I'd make is, remember, we are making a COVID adjustment this year for single family homes like yours in a condo that would bring down the valuation somewhere between 8 and 12% from where it is now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Assessor. We had a question from Denise. The first part of the question is, how do you justify an increase of approximately 150%? And then if there was a successful tax appeal through a condo HOA, and are there any additional steps if still not satisfied?
I would have to know the specifics of the circumstance involved. I think a lot of us are aware of situations and circumstances where in the past some properties may have been very undervalued. I can give you an example. We have looked at hotels that were assessed at $16 million, but that had mortgages over $30 million on them. And those properties were telling their lenders that the properties were worth $60 million. We see lots of buildings where people have been telling their lenders their property is worth much more, and then we see the market properties transacting for prices that are much, much higher than their assessments. And how do we justify that? Well, if we're undervaluing a group of properties, remember that all of our assessments are interconnected. If we're undervaluing a group of properties, everyone else who lives in your community is picking up the tab for the undervaluation of that property. So all I tell my staff to do is to try to estimate accurately, fairly, using evidence, uniformly treating everyone in the same way, how a property should be valued. We back it up with evidence. We show how we get to the number. And there have been some situations where things were very undervalued under the Berrios administration that we found really to be deficient. And I just note that we can also make mistakes. It does happen. Sometimes we think the footage that we think you have is not the footage you actually have. The kind of building you have might be different from what we think you have. A lot of times when we make a valuation mistake, it's not because the model was wrong, it's because the data we put into the model was wrong. So that's a great, if the valuation that we're using for your property is not what you think your property actually would trade for in the market, usually that is a great bounds for an appeal, and it might be based on the information we have about your property. That's again why we encourage folks to submit information about their property in advance of the appeals process and assessment process, so we can get it right the first time.
That is very helpful, and I'm happy to see we've got a lot of questions coming in. For those questions that do not get addressed, we'll try our best to get answers sent to you later, as well as anyone who reaches out to us after the fact, we'll try to get you answers. We have a question from Thomas. Can you briefly explain the multiplier and how it is calculated?
Sure. So the multiplier is not determined by us. It's determined by the state. And so in Cook County, we use 10% of market value to determine the assessed value of residential property. For commercial and industrial, the county has determined that we use 25% of market value for commercial and industrial property. But then once we've done that, the state requires that we true up assessed values to 1/3 of market value to make our county comparable with the rest of the state, where all properties are assessed at 1/3 of market value. And so the multiplier basically trues that up. And so it looks at it across the county, and it's a constant number that multiplies your assessed value, so that total assessed value in our county is 1/3 of what the state estimates as market value. Now, I think a lot of times many of us get a little bit caught up in the multiplier because The multiplier doesn't actually affect how much tax you pay in almost every case. And the reason why is that the tax that you pay is really a function of your assessed value divided by total assessed value in your community, multiplied by the amount of money that has to be raised. When you multiply your property by a certain number and you multiply every other property in your community by the same number, it doesn't change the amount of tax you pay. What it does indicate is a trend in how well is our county doing in making sure that assessed values are nearby market values. And we need to be making more progress there. One of the things that disappointed me in the north suburbs last year is that we didn't get the multiplier down because we tried to do our part at the assessor's office to make sure that all commercial properties were valued appropriately, but the Board of Review made a lot of cuts to assess values in commercial, so we didn't make as much progress on getting the multiplier down as we would have liked. But that's the first step in the process. I hope that answers your question.
Amazing. I appreciate that. Thank you. And we did have a question that was answered in the comments, but for those of you curious, the question was, are garages considered part of the square footage for property taxes? And that was answered on the Facebook that if it is attached to the house, then it is included in the square footage. The next question that was hoped to be answered is from Amelia. It says, Assessor Fitzkagi said that larger adjustments were made to small apartment buildings less than 6 units. My building is exactly 6 units. What is the rationale for me to pay more than a resident in a 5-unit building?
Actually, it would be 6 units and below. So for the person who's asking the question, it's 6 units and below. So you'd be covered. The rationale is why they're treated differently is actually has to do, there's a county ordinance that treats multifamily buildings 6 units and below as one class, and then units 7 or more in a different class. And the 2 to 6 unit apartment buildings are very numerous. We have a lot of them all over the county, and there are enough of them that we can assess them using a kind of model that we use for single family homes. That's because we have lots of transactions there, and we have characteristics information. We can use a statistical model that has lots of data points. It's actually more accurate. For the larger apartment buildings, we need to look at their income that they earn, because there are fewer buildings like that and they don't trade as frequently. So we're more dependent on income modeling and the market, and that also follows market practice. Those buildings tend to be valued more based on the income they earn rather than the sales comp transaction volume that we see on the smaller apartment buildings. So it's both the way the ordinance is set up in the county and market practice that we treat those two groups differently.
Amazing. Thank you so very much, Assessor. We have a question from Julie. How does Tiff borrowing affect our property taxes?
Well, TIFs, this is a very good question. We at the assessor's office, we assess values for a property the same way whether a property is in a TIF or not. So it doesn't change the way we do assessments, but the way TIFs affect your property taxes is by the following. Basically, any value appreciation that happens inside a TIF after the TIF is created does not go into the base of assessed value in your community. So, for example, if you have $100 million in assessed value in your community, and then within the TIF, you create the TIF, and later the TIF has $10 million of assessed value that's created inside the TIF, that 10 is not added to the 100 million of the base in your community. And so it means that the rate ends up being higher on folks who live in your community. So if you own a $1 million property in an assessed value community of 100 million, you are 1% of the levy. If that $10 million within the TIF stayed in the base, you'd be 1 million divided by 110 million. So your rate would actually be a little bit lower if the TIF wasn't created. So TIFs do raise the rates on people who live in communities. Now, the benefit to creating a TIF is that reinvestments can be made inside the TIF. When the TIF expires, if there's a lot more value, it can be added into the base. In the meantime, any revenues that are inside the TIF can be refunded to the taxpayers and the rest of the county. So that is the effect of TIFs. Whether it ends up being beneficial to a taxpayer in the community depends on how much value is being created inside the TIF, and then how much is eventually returned to taxpayers in the community. It's a hard trade-off for a person to evaluate. I think there are lots of transparency problems with TIFs, and that's why I generally advocate for keeping property values not in a TIF, but keep it as part of the overall larger base so everyone gets a lower rate.
Amazing. No, I greatly appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for submitting questions. If you have any other questions that you would like to get answered, please put them in the live comments and we'll be happy to get to them. Assessor, I have a question. Can you talk about how assessments and property taxes are related but different? For example,
Sure.
Though your assessment went up, it doesn't mean your property taxes will.
Yes, so this is a good question because Illinois does this a little bit differently from other states. I think, and the way other states do it is a little bit more common sense, but I'll tell you why we do it here and the way we do, and it does have benefits for people. So in other states, there's a fixed rate in your community. It's called a millage rate, and all you have to worry about as a property tax owner is what's your assessed value, what's the local millage rate, and then you can plan your property taxes. But then the disadvantage in a system like that is if property values grow and the millage rate stays the same, total amount of property taxes go up, and you could end up, there can be a lot of money coming in through property taxes there's not necessarily a control on how much total amount is being levied. Here in Illinois, because we have lots of taxing bodies, and because of changes that have evolved over time, we fix the amount of dollars that are levied every year. And that grows a little bit. If you live in a community that's had a referendum on deciding to spend more on your schools or for another local purpose, you see this, that you get a voice in whether you want to levy above and beyond a certain amount each year in doing that. So here in Illinois, we fix the amount of dollars that are to be raised. In Cook County, it's a total of about $15 billion. And then we split that amongst us based on assessed values. So it's really your share of the levy that's really the important thing that determines your tax bill, not the assessment in isolation. Your assessment is interconnected with how other people are assessed in your community, because that's how we divide up the levy amongst you. Now, to get to your question, what that means is that if your assessed value grows by 10%, but everyone else's assessed value also grows by 10%, your share of that levy hasn't changed. And so your tax bill wouldn't change unless the levy changed. And so I think as we've been putting through reforms in our system, when we came into office, we've been really trying to address areas where assessments were off, either over-assessment or under-assessment of certain kinds of properties, so that we're making sure that everyone's only paying their fair share of that levy, that their piece of the pie is not too big or too small compared to others, because all of our assessments are interconnected. And I think some folks who had been under-assessed were alarmed when their assessments went up a lot. But I think the thing that was missed in that discussion was that because we're addressing other areas of under-assessment, the pie was growing too. And so if their assessment went up, but other assessments went up as well, the increase in tax was much less than the assessed value was. So that's an example where a change in assessed value does not lead to a change in your property tax. And I can give you a concrete example. In Evanston, homeowner assessed value did go up in some cases, but because commercial assessed value went up more, actually for a lot of homeowners, their assessed value went up, but their property tax went down because their share of the pie decreased. So that's the important thing. We try to put all of this, it can be tough to follow the bouncing balls and the different pieces, but what we do each time we reassess a community like yours, the person who asked the question, we put out information saying, to help you put it into context, to say, here's how much assessments went up in your community, and actually we provide more detail. Here's how much assessments went up in your neighborhood, and so you can compare it. We show all the different transactions that happen in a community, so you can put that into context. And then you have the additional context of here's what's going on with assessments for other kinds of your property in your community, so you can see if the pie for everyone else is growing. And we think that's, even though the system's complex, we want to give you the numbers to help you understand what's happening. But that's a great question. I find that this is one of the hardest things to explain to someone about how our system works.
That is amazing. I appreciate that. Let's see. Got a couple questions coming in. I think they're going to clarify them for me, so I'm going to go to another one just quick. I was curious, what are some of the success stories that you like to highlight during your time in office so far?
Well, I think first of all, the thing that I'm most proud of is that we have managed to right the ship in terms of addressing areas where our assessments had not been accurate. In many cases, this helped small businesses and homeowners when we're getting our assessment system realigned. And our first crack at this was the northern suburbs last year, where residential homeowners' share of the overall pie in the north suburbs decreased because we addressed some of the systemic problems in our valuation. So that is a real, and that means a lot. That can mean hundreds or even thousands of dollars per year for a homeowner. So we're really proud of the work that we've done on that score. I think second of all, we're really proud of the work that we've done to address COVID. We're first in the nation to address the effect of COVID on assessments, and we now see other states following our lead too. And it's so important to do that because we know how cataclysmic COVID-19 has been on unemployment, has been on small businesses, on all kinds of businesses, on communities of every stripe. And it took a lot of hard work from our team to get all of our work in, but we're really proud of what we've done, and we'll continue to do it. I think third of all, the success story is legislatively, we've tried to make the office work better for average people. We worked with our leaders in Springfield to get past automatic renewal of the senior exemption. So the senior exemption, you used to have to reapply every year, and it was pretty ridiculous because you had to recertify that you were still over 65. We're not getting any younger, but this was an imposition that was put on hundreds of thousands of senior households in the county every year. And I had heard so much testimony from people all over the state about how much this, what an imposition this was. And my dad, who is one of the cheapest guys around, because my mom, his wife, died. He was distraught. He forgot to get in the paperwork for his senior exemption, and created a lot of trouble and cost some money. And people shouldn't have to do this. We have the technology to keep track of how old people are. So we worked with our friends in the legislature, and leaders in Springfield. One of the sponsor of the bill, which was Fred Crespo, who represents constituents out in the district. We worked with him. We got the bill passed, and so senior exemptions automatically renewed starting this year, and we're very proud of that work. If you turn 65, you do still have to apply for it, but still, this is helping hundreds of thousands of seniors every year. Can you imagine how bad it would have been if we didn't have that bill passed? We have onset of COVID-19, and we'd have so many seniors turning in physical paperwork or coming into our office, exposing themselves to danger. So we're really proud of that. Also, we worked with our friends, with leaders in Springfield to extend this concept for the period of COVID-19 only to the senior freeze, to folks with disabilities, veterans with disabilities, to automatically renew those exemptions too. So that was, we really built on that accomplishment last year. And then I guess the last success story I'd point to is we've really done a lot to use technology to serve you better. So we think we've improved the work at the call center a lot. You know, in July we did 10,000 calls where we only lost 4% of our calls, and the wait time was getting down to under 2 minutes by the end of the month, which was just terrific. I'm so proud of our team and in improving an area that we'd received a lot of complaints. We created a new website for you that has automatic where you can do online appeals, online exemptions, document requests, and others. And we're proud of that technology work too, and we have more to come.
Really appreciate that, Assessor. We had a question come in. Is there a second step available after the initial appeal? What are my options if my potential market value is less than other condos due to lack of updates?
Sure. So if you've appealed to our office and still you still felt you haven't been treated fairly, you actually have 3 other ways that you can get relief. You have the court system, the circuit court system. You have the Illinois Property Tax Appeals Board, and you have the Cook County Board of Review. These are all areas that can take appeals from you as well. Our state provides many avenues to make sure that your assessment is done fairly. What we encourage you to do is we remind you that you can appeal at our office. You don't need a lawyer, and you don't need to come up with your own comps. It's very easy to do it online. And if you have, if there are building characteristics that are incorrect that we have about your building, you can still come to us to point those out, and we can work with you on not only on an appeal when we open up your area for appeals, but also we can work on a certificate of error so you can be refunded taxes that you overpaid because of an error that we made about the physical description of your property. That's called a certificate of error, and you can go to our website at cookcountyassessor.com and see how more you can do that. And I think also in the chat room we'll have links that we can give to you so you can find that out too.
Incredible. No, thank you so very much, Assessor. And I know we're getting close to the end of our show, but maybe one of our last questions. Are there some initiatives upcoming that you're excited about with your office?
Yes. So first of all, we will be will be for everyone, every property owner who's a single family homeowner. We will be making COVID adjustments because of the impact of COVID. So look out for those later this year. That will be true up in your community, Commissioner Morrison. Second of all, one of the initiatives that we have coming up is we're going to be having a lot more tools on our website. So because of the investment that you, Commissioner Morrison, have made, as well as with the rest of the board in technology at our office, it's expanding the capabilities of what we can do in serving all of you who live in the community. So we'll have more tools on the website for how you can find your own comps, compare how your property is valued compared to others. If you want to just see what's going on your street, it'll be much easier to use. You'll be able to find properties that are exactly like yours in a much more easy manner. Appeals are going to be even more streamlined with a big technology software project that's being implemented for next year. And also we're working really hard on making sure that we have more workshops like these that can be done virtually, so you don't have to leave the comfort of your own home, and that we can serve you well through that. Our outreach team is really, I encourage you guys to go to our Facebook page and sign up and follow us. You can see when there's an event like this coming up if you have more questions. And how great is that you can stay home and if you don't get your question answered here, come into the next event and follow up on it. at one of these workshops that we're doing virtually. I'm really proud of our outreach team, and we're doing a good job in using data to do more things. I guess the last initiative that is very important, that is unfinished business, is we worked very hard on a data modernization bill in Springfield, which would make sure that we could follow the practice in other parts of the United States for larger commercial properties to submit basic information about rent and expenses, so we could get those assessments right depending on current conditions, and address data gaps that we have. Data gaps often lead to our assessments being off and creating unfairness in the assessment system. And oftentimes it's smaller commercial properties that are disadvantaged by that. And so the data modernization bill, it passed out of the Senate by a bipartisan supermajority in 2019. We have the votes to pass it in the House. Your representative, Crespo, is one of the co-sponsors of that bill in the House. We are going to continue to seek passage of it. And it's more important than ever under COVID-19 that we do pass it, because COVID-19 shows that conditions can change radically in commercial properties. We don't want to be assessing based on old, stale data. And having up-to-date data like we'd get through the data modernization framework would help us keep track of that. And I think some of the folks who were opposed to the bill were opposed to it because they thought it was a one-way street to engage in redistribution or something like that in our system. And I think what we're showing under COVID is it's not a two-way street, that assessments can come down if the data is there to show us that they should come down. And we want to be assessing based on current conditions. So that's a very important initiative. We'll keep working on that. I think more than ever, people want property tax reform. This is one of the elements of unfinished business down in Springfield. And the Property Tax Relief Task Force highlighted the data modernization bill as one of the most logical things that we could address to pass property tax reform in Springfield. And so we will keep pushing at it.
Amazing. No, thank you so very much, Assessor. I just want to thank you and your staff. I see that they are doing a great job with technology. I know that some of the questions submitted, you've got staff right now working the comments and connecting with constituents to help get those questions answered. I got to commend you on that. You've got a great staff, so please continue to keep up the hard work. I look forward to continuing to partner with your office and do events like this in the future. We don't know how long this pandemic will last, but I really thank you for the opportunity to virtually come out to our district today and help answer these questions. Thank you so very much, Assessor.
Well, happy to do it, Commissioner Morrison. I know we all look forward to the day when we can go back to doing these sorts of things in person. And but until then, we're happy to do it, and we're really proud to be working with you, Commissioner Morrison.
Thank you so much, Assessor.